We are back. And we're live.
We are live.
Yeah.
We're back. We are still here. The last time we were here.
Well, why don't we welcome everybody
Oh, welcome back
to Lifestyle Business on Launchpad TV. I'm Chris.
And I'm Ann.
And we got a new studio set up where we got new set of new situation. So yeah, the last time we saw you,
it's officially our third season of Launchpad TV, entering the autumn season.
Yeah, although
now,
we look like we're still in summer.
We're very nautical. If you haven't noticed, because we're here in North Carolina. So think about it like when, Regis, R.I.P., and Kathy would head over to another location, and they'd be like into the vibe. They'd be like, oh, look at us in Mexico. Well, this is us in North Carolina. And the last time we have not been on the air since we said hi to Dee from our Newark location.
Yeah, that's right. And here's the story. We literally walked out after Launchpad TV, which we film on the West Coast at noon, right?
Noon.
We walked out of our office to go get lunch, and out over our co-working space, off in the distance towards our house, was this huge plume of smoke.
A big plume of smoke.
A plume of smoke, and we were like, what the F?
As usually, I think you're glossing over some of the details because I think it's important to talk about, which was where we live is in a little bit of a rural neighborhood. And so on the street, we have this organization called COPE that comes together around fire safety. And we got a note from the COPE leader saying the end of Mill Creek needs to start thinking about an evacuation warning. And so I went and told another fellow coworker who lived at the end of the street that they should go. And Chris said to me, Ann, don't get so dramatic.
Don't overreact.
Stop overreacting. Stop worrying. It's the end of Mill Creek. And I was like, did you look up? And he was like, it doesn't look that good. So we went home. I went home, sort of sort out. Our nanny was like, is everything okay? We're like, we think it's going to be fine.
I was like, it's a little early for fire season.
Yeah. Anyway, it was nonetheless one of the hardest days that we've faced. It's in my top 3. And I remember driving home to check in and seeing the smoke and seeing it go up above the trees. And I remember getting home and saying, well, this is just normal and it'll be okay. So let's pack for the beach at least, because we were on our way on vacation that week. And we knew that with evacuations, you don't always get back in, even if fire isn't a risk anymore. And so I think we really believed that the fire wasn't going to be a big issue. And for me, it was a big deal to see a lot of our neighbors who were at the end of the road that were a lot more rural, and amidst the trees, and just see them with their cars parked down by our house as they watched the smoke. And I think it made us realize that, maybe it wasn't just, this was not a drill.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it clearly turned out not to be. We evacuated to our friends, Zach and Mandy. We were at their house. I think I consumed as much Twitter as you can possibly consume over the next 4 days. Thank God for, a lot of people who do a lot of great reporting, because it's hard you can't really watch the news. It's just not, but anyway, over the next 4 days, the fire burned closer and closer. Our Wallace Creek, which is the road where we go for runs and walks and take Harper. All of the houses along Wallace Creek burned. Our road, Mill Creek Road, goes out past our house about, almost 10 miles, 9 miles or so. The majority of our neighbors lost their homes. Description is like, we haven't been out there, but apocalyptic. A bomb went off. Just terrible. And so we're fortunate. Our house didn't burn. Very fortunate, but unbelievable what's happened over since we last left you.
Yeah. And
so that's what's been going on in our lives.
Yeah. In case 2020 hadn't been good enough, we were like, let's just nearly burn down the house. Anyway, it has been tough. So we spent a week in still evacuated, and then we headed out to North Carolina here to where Chris's family has a place, and so we're festively in nautical at the beach. So we've been able to find some solace and find some.
We don't have any
break.
We don't have any blazers. We don't have any work clothes here.
No work clothes. Actually, it's getting cold, and so we're excited. We're going to head back to California in the next 2 weeks, and we can't wait to get home and just be part of our community. I think the reality is that it has been a stark contrast being here, to be frank. For us in California, we know that climate change is there, and we're going to be talking to Dane in a few moments. And Dane knows that climate change is in his neck of the woods as well, because he gets tornadoes in Kansas, and we get hurricanes here like we haven't seen in North Carolina, and we get fires on the West Coast, and they're burning not like, for a couple days, but for weeks and weeks at a time. Our fire just went out a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's been pretty hard. I will say it's been somewhat challenging here. You definitely feel a lack of belief that, they're like, it's just a crazy year in climate, which frankly, when your state and your home is on fire, just doesn't feel accurate. And so I think it's been a bit of a challenge. I will say it's been a bit of a challenge to sort of see that. And you had a good quote. You were quoting at Gavin Newsom.
Yeah, I think the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, has put it well. And it's just basically, anybody who at this point is sticking their head in the sand and saying that, the science isn't in or whatever. I mean, that's just complete bullshit for one. And, it's what our president says and what he said in the press conference out there. And, I feel like the same position that Gavin takes. Like, I don't suffer fools. I don't suffer. Not educating yourself, not believing in it is not an excuse. It's not up for debate. It's a fact. The science is in. The question is, what are we going to be doing about it? Because, we have a 2-year-old daughter. A lot of people watching probably have kids. What are we going to do? Make a decision around our tax rate for the next 4 years, or we literally have 10 years to make dramatic changes, start leaving the oil in the ground, the fossil fuels in the ground that need to be left in the ground. It's clearly the existential crisis of humanity that's, that now we're seeing it because we haven't addressed it and have been well aware of it for, years and years and years. So, and it was on our doorstep, right? It's, a quarter mile from our house. Not that we weren't firmly, in agreement with it before, but now it's big. It's come very close, and I think it's really, we have a lot of neighbors who we're friends with who have lost their homes. Anyway, so we gotta start tackling it. So,
not to mention, we literally, I don't think I'm a witch, really, but I might be, because it feels like everywhere I've been in 2020 has been gotten totally fucked. And I don't know if that's 2020 or if that's just me and I'm casting a bad spell in my wake. But like literally all the places we went camping, all the places we visited, they're on fire. And it's really sad and it's really scary. And it's just another thing that we've got to do. Added to the gut punch that was us losing Ruth Bader Ginsburg last week. So I've been really positive and upbeat through all the trials and tribulations of the last few months and year, but damn, it's hard. I don't have much in the tank on this one.
All right, well.
Dane's like, I'm so glad I got booked for this show.
All
right, but let's switch gear.
Do you want to, let's bring in Dane, and then we'll do, we've got a new segment called Member News. So we're going to be highlighting some Launchpad members. But let's bring Dane in first.
You bet.
And we'll talk to Dane, and then we'll get.
Are you mansplaining how to run the show?
No, I'm
feels like it.
Just doing what I'm told here.
All right. And now he is an experienced leader, executive researcher, and communicator on enhancing growth, innovation, and opportunity. He is also former Kauffman, former Startup Genome, former Launchpad. I mean, still Launchpad in our hearts. He is an amazing contributor to Forbes and a professor and all kinds of things. Dane Stangler, he is also sort of our guru around the state of small business creation, innovation, and entrepreneurship across the United States. And we are delighted to have Dane with us today. Hi, Dane.
Hey, Ann. Hey, Chris.
You're on.
How are you?
There we go.
Yay.
How are you?
Oh, hey, Ann. Hey, Chris. How are you?
Did you know our house nearly burned down?
I did. I'm sorry. I'm glad you got out. I'm glad it didn't burn.
I'm glad it didn't burn. I'm glad we got out, and that is that's a good point. Everybody got out. There were not injuries or fatalities or anything like that on our road in our neighborhood.
And I think that's actually really,
and that is a really important thing.
And that's one of the things, which is why we have to have conversations like the ones we're having with people, because 2 years ago, when Harper was born, was paradise, and our road was basically paradise. Is how it's configured. And we had this meeting, and they were like, "Our road is like paradise, so we have to get ready. We have to be planned. We have to prepare." And we spent 2 years preparing, and it came. And if it had been in October, it would have been a lot worse because of the winds. But it's because everybody got out.
Yeah,
and we did, and all the planning actually mattered, so that's a good thing. So, Dane, how are you?
I'm fine. I didn't know the theme was going to be nautical clothes for today. I would have dressed.
I mean, all you need is a cravat, and you'd be ready to go.
Yeah, right. I'm doing well.
No, it's good to see you. What are you working on these days?
So I spend much of my time working for the Bipartisan Policy Center, which is a Washington think tank, and I have a few other projects going as well, including continuing to write about small business and entrepreneurship.
That's great. Yeah, and obviously you've been sort of following the COVID stuff, and we've been working together through that. I was sort of curious. I mean, one of the reasons I reached out to you to get you on is to try to put some context around that for us, because we're experiencing a crisis for many small businesses. Main Street. We had Bruce Katz on in the last season. He was talking about the need for Main Street regenerators, but what I'm wondering about is, is there almost like a tipping point here, hopefully not to the negative, but small business creation has been on the decline, and your research, some of your writing has sort of showed that, for a number of years now. It's obviously critical that we keep businesses alive through this. What are you seeing? What are the sort of the trends, and what is COVID doing to the small business ecosystem?
Sure. So I'll talk about a number of things. If it's okay if I get just a tiny bit technical with some of the data in this,
yeah.
not too technical, but Bruce, as you know, has done some great work through the crisis. His writings have been really insightful, and he's done a really good job of highlighting a lot of the local efforts that we've seen pop up around the country and that have been so helpful for small business. Let me address your question in a couple of different ways. Pre-crisis, we had kind of two trends going on at once. And this is where we get into some of the differences in data sets. So over the last 10, 15, almost 20 years, as you mentioned, Chris, at the country level, we have experienced this kind of nationwide decline in new business creation. Now, that is the creation of new, employer businesses, those that come into existence with employees or will have employees. So not, solo member LLCs or sole proprietors. Those had really never rebounded from the 2008, 2009 financial crisis. And in particular, we saw, and we talked about this at Launchpad quite a bit, we saw a narrowing of that business creation geographically. So the businesses that were being created, you saw more and more concentration in just a handful of metro areas. And we also saw fewer high growth firms being born and being created. So not only did we have kind of a long-term downward trend in business creation, but then the businesses that create the most in terms of employment and innovations were getting fewer and fewer. And what we did see, we saw those in fewer and fewer places. So that again, underscores the importance of the work done by Launchpad and others. At the same time, pre-crisis, again, we had seen a bit of an uptick in business applications. So that's when, when you set up Launchpad, when you set up a consulting business, when you set up an LLC, you apply for an employee, an employer identification number, an EIN. Those had increased, but they had not increased for those employer firms. So again, we continue to see kind of stagnation in business creation among businesses that were going to have employees. And when the crisis hit, a couple of different things happened. One, we've just seen, as you know, massive closure, permanent closure among existing small businesses. There was some research done over the summer, and they found, I think by May, there had been a 25% decline. So 25% of small businesses in the census data were just gone, had disappeared. It was even higher for Black business owners. It was a 40% decline, which is just a tremendous hit. That rebounded somewhat in June and July as things reopened, but you're still looking at a 20 to 25% decrease in the number of small businesses. Yelp, in its analysis of its data, found that 55% of business closings on its platform were permanent by the end of June. There were not all businesses struggle in the latest census data. I was just going over some of it. You have 3/4 of them saying, and these are large sample sizes, 3/4 of them saying they're still experiencing large or moderate negative effects. Over half of them have less than 2 months cash on hand. So we continue to see struggles. On the other hand, sorry, this is getting a bit long-winded. On the other hand, we go back to those business applications that I mentioned. They fell off a cliff March, April. Not many people were going to open a new business, employer or non-employer, in April and May. They were down by like 40 or 50%, I think, compared to the spring of 2019. Since then, they've actually gone through the roof, and far outpacing the level that we saw post financial crisis in 2009, 2010, and even actually outpacing 2019 levels. So I think there's a couple of things going on there. One, we are seeing people who would have started a business in April deferred it to July. We're seeing people who closed their business, closed one business permanently in April or May, either reopen a new one, or reopen their old one, but under a new tax ID, or start a new one completely. They gave up on their restaurant and they created a delivery service or something. as well as people who are starting businesses because they see opportunities in the pandemic. So that's good that we've seen business applications strongly rebound. The caveat I would add is that we've seen a much bigger spike among the non-employer business
So people, more like people
applications
hanging out a shingle.
compared to the employer applications. So there's a lot of employees or not intending to hire employees. So that would be the one caveat I would add to that. So there's a kind of a lot going on, and I would say, despite the increase in business applications, there's still a lot of hardship and struggles going on out there among small businesses and entrepreneurs.
I was going to throw one. I have a curveball for you, and if you don't know the answer, you can just say pass. Did you see recently that there was some new legislation about trying to encourage more contract workers?
Yes, I did.
Did you want to comment on that?
Do you want me to comment on that? Is that...
Yeah. Or you can pass.
Yeah, maybe I'll pass on that.
Fully formed. All right. We can dig in
Where were you
on
going
that.
with that?
No, it's a new legislation that's coming out that was being passed in the House, right, Dane? They were sort of slipping in some legislation around trying to reclassify a lot of workers so that essentially, anyway, I think there are broad economic impacts of that. Dane being Dane, I figured he would have been up on it. But if you're not prepared to comment on the impact of that, then I think we can save it for another show.
There's a lot of moving parts with that. You've got the AB5 or whatever it is in California. You've got the Department of Labor has done a lot lately in the last few years on contractor or employee classification, as well as the joint employer doctrine, which thus arises from that. There's just a lot of moving parts there. I'm not quite.
We'll unpack it later. Moving on.
All right. Well, coming back to sort of the trends in small business, new business formation, that to me, like, that's a critical part of in economic recovery. There's sort of a number of things going on, and I'm just interested in your take. We're obviously every time you go through a downturn or a recession, when the economy comes back, it comes back very differently. So some of the concerns now, natural concerns would be, the continued rise of automation, some of the things Andrew Yang would talk about. Like, I think, we've heard firsthand from a number of employers that some of the jobs that they shed, during this downturn, they have no intention of rehiring. That was, part of just, sort of competitiveness, right? Being leaner and meaner, sort of during this time. To me, that, begins to, we're sort of entering a phase where you almost, entrepreneurship is the natural antidote, along with UBI and other things. But, people forming businesses, if there's, less employment and people are being reclassified as contractors, and there's more and more challenges.
Right, I might as well be
in the economy. You might as well start a business. I mean, are you optimistic? Do you see trends that would point you to the increase in entrepreneurship, the geographic diversification, like we've obviously talked about in momentum markets and whatnot? Optimistic or pessimistic right now based on the current environment and sort of how you think the recovery is going to happen?
I'm always optimistic about entrepreneurship because I think it's never a bad time to start a company. And there are, historically, as you suggest, there are lots of opportunities, that open up during a downturn, and we've kind of seen a historical pattern there. There's obviously barriers to that. Is financing going to be more or less available coming out of the crisis? from banks and non-banks? Are people going to be able to just kind of survive against some of the big companies? There's a lot of concern about competition or lack of competition, as we've seen big companies. A lot of big companies do fairly well through the crisis, so there's still barriers there. I think my optimism would be on two fronts there. One is we have, coming out of last crisis, I think part of the reason we didn't see a rebound in overall business creation is while we had, incubators and while we had some support systems, especially the private support systems for entrepreneurs represented by places like Launchpad, represented by accelerators, represented by local support efforts just didn't exist 10 years ago to the same degree it does now. People understand and recognize the importance of entrepreneurs now. So that alone, that just by itself, I think, gives this recovery, when you talk about entrepreneurship, a different character. And then two, just the severe hardship that we've seen this year for young companies, new companies, companies owned by women, companies owned by people of color, has hopefully kind of finally landed small business and entrepreneurship at the top of the priority list. I mean, kind of lots of politicians pay homage to it. We got to support small businesses, but you don't necessarily see it prioritized when it comes to making actual policy and legislation. And I would hope and anticipate that this crisis changes it. Where I am pessimistic, Chris, is when you talk about the employees or the workforce. I think the implications for workers and kind of ordinary Americans is the consequences are going to be drawn out for a long time, especially as you correctly point out that a lot of businesses are learning to function with fewer. And I think we're going to see those implications drag on the economy for quite some time.
Yeah, interesting. I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think you made a good point in your opening. There's never a bad time to start a business, and particularly if you're out of work and, when your opportunity cost is lower, it's a good time to take a risk. I think we need more entrepreneurs because there are going to be fewer well-paying jobs. I mean, I think that, a lot of what you hear politically, manufacturing jobs coming back, those types of things. The reality is those things are being automated, right? And there's been a huge concentration in the tech economy. These companies, the stock market's, going gangbusters led by tech stocks, but that's not, that's not the economy, right? The economy, you see it, right? These businesses are shut down, the restaurants and salons and gyms and, all of these types of things. So I think, I concur that it's going to be more and more difficult to make ends meet as an employee, particularly as a contract employee. The power that labor had 30 years ago is virtually non-existent today. I think, your point about legislation, I think we need legislation to protect workers, workers' rights, Uber drivers, people being reclassified. I mean, there's no protections for them. There's no safety net for them at all. So in that scenario, looking at what the odds are, start a business, right? Hang out a shingle, do something that involves technology.
I mean, the path for entrepreneurship is always about creating agency, right? Mm-hmm. And that's something that we talk about a lot. And being able to, agency is really about being able to determine what I work on every day, rather than working for a company that tells you what you're supposed to work on, right? And at the end of the day, I do think, the reality is that companies are not going to go back to work the way they used to. I mean, we're hearing that loud and clear. Remote work is the way of the future, which, let's not talk about the real estate market. You want to be in a flexible real estate. But the reality is that people need to have an opportunity to figure out what their path needs to be, right? And it creates lots of flexibility. Like you can work where you want to be, you can live where you want, if remote work is the way it is. But it also makes it possible for companies. In crisis, you shrink down. You don't then always grow back up. So it's really interesting. And also, I see a concentration of people who are well capitalized are very well capitalized. So it's a big opportunity for them to grow faster. People who are undercapitalized tend to get smaller, right? So we're starting to see that spread amidst the company types.
Yeah.
All right. Well, good. Anything? Any closing questions or thoughts for Dane?
No. When are we seeing you next in real life? See, we don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. Hopefully sometime soon, but I don't know if it's going to happen.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Now in the end of the year, I feel like we're gonna all be locked down.
Let's just ride our way to 2021.
Yeah.
And zoom it up. No, but Dane, kind of give us a perspective on, if you're an entrepreneur thinking about starting your business, just give us your sort of perspective on what are the first things that you'd be thinking about right now when it comes to the environment we're working in.
In terms of what type of business to start?
Sure.
One comment I would make, Anne, you were talking about, this is an opportunity for people to kind of, carve out something more meaningful, right? Or a way to find their meaning and follow their passion. And I think this is a good example of where the data kind of meets reality. Because when we talk about those, in the data, when we talk about those non-employers we've seen such a spike in starting, a lot of them will become employers. And, it's for that reason, is someone's just hanging out their shingle, they're trying to get through, a lot of those people will make traction and will transition to hiring people, growing, whatever. They may not grow to 100 people or whatever, they might go to 10 or 15. So I think this is exactly where, what we see in the data meets your point about this is opening up a lot of opportunity for people. I think in terms of for people starting today, I just saw something on LinkedIn this morning that their analysis of mobility data shows more and more people moving to places like Kansas City, to Milwaukee, to Sacramento. If I was an entrepreneur, I would my first place to look would be, not one of the kind of big tech centers, right, of New York or Boston or San Francisco or Austin, because of the real estate implications that you're very familiar with, because of the remote work possibilities, but because in those places you're going to maybe find a lot, maybe some more fertile ground. Those places are going to be really begging, for entrepreneurs, really eager to support new entrepreneurs, their local ones and those from other places. I would look for a lot of creativity in the financing space. We've already seen, kind of the non-bank lenders step in, thankfully allowed by the government to participate in some of those programs. You're going to see a lot more of that. Some people think has a lot of risk to it, probably. But we are seeing a lot more creativity and flexibility in the financing space, and entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs are going to be well poised to exploit that. And I think for entrepreneurs starting out, I go back to Chris's point about, where are the opportunities given more automation, employers looking, up ages or, value opportunities. Does that open up for my business in a variety of different sectors and industries?
All right.
Yep. Okay.
We are huge believers in choosing where you work. We're choosing where you live versus living where you work. I got to get that down better. My brain's in evacuation mode. Yeah.
I think, we're the work from home, work remotely forever that you're seeing with the tech companies in the Bay Area. We personally know a lot of people who are leaving the Bay Area at this point. They may be working for Google, Twitter, Facebook for the next year. But as they get back to, Milwaukee and, wherever they're going, North Carolina and New Orleans, eventually some of them will start jobs. So just a reallocation of talent is a good thing, start companies. So
All right.
we'll see where that goes. Dane, really good to be with you. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Likewise.
Thanks for all the knowledge.
Yeah. And we'll let you go now, but we'll catch up soon.
All right.
All right. Bye, Dane. All right. Cool to be with Dane again. That was
Guy
fun.
always makes us feel smarter after.
He's smarter. He's got the facts on.
He's got the facts. All right, we got a new segment for you guys.
All right, new segment,
shout-outs.
and we want to cover some of the action happening with launchpad companies
on the ground and in your neck of the woods.
Yeah. So, do you want to kick off, and we'll go back and forth and do some of the news about
All right.
what's going on in the launchpad communities?
First up, huge shout out to Ashley Edwards. She has been doing amazing things with her company MindRight during the pandemic. In addition to being selected as one of 12 startups in the inaugural cohort of the Google Startups Accelerator for Black founders, Ashley and her team outdid herself. And last week, she became the first Black woman in New Jersey and the one of only 35, which might be part of the problem, in the U.S. to raise $1 million or more in venture capital. See the Forbes article here on our website that Ariel's going to put up. And whoop, whoop. Go, Ashley.
That is awesome. Congrats, Ashley Edwards.
All right.
Sticking with Newark, we are super excited to welcome back into the Newark location, Phone.com. Phone.com is one of our original members. They're sort of OG Launchpad, and they're coming back into the office, and they'll be back in October 1st. It's interesting. I think people are sort of feeling like, well, obviously the pandemic is not over and we need to stay safe. There's more knowledge, and Dio and David and our whole team has done a great job of getting their locations kind of back open with a lot of safety and protocols, and people are wearing masks. And I just feel like we know more about this. So we're super excited to have Phone.com back.
Yeah, I mean, working at Launchpad looks different than it may have looked a few months ago, but it's still, sometimes it's important to be able to get out. You might spend a little less time, might feel a little different, but sometimes you really need to get into the office.
You sure do.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
All right. Member Magic in Stockton, Oracles of Truth. While the Code Academy with Philip Land has not taken place because, obviously, of the disruption we've had, lots of members who are starting their own Code Academies. And Oracles of Truth is starting 2 new programs, one of which is a coding academy for designed to give both marketable skills from the ground up to people needing help to get gainful employment.
That's amazing. Oracle of Truth.
Oracle of Truth.
All right.
All right. And now?
Cool. And
let's go back to Stockton.
Sticking with Stockton. Stockton Numbers has been able to get members in Stockton that apply for grants a 100% acceptance rate on the grant applications in Stockton. So Stockton, actually, as we know, has had a number of programs and grants to support small businesses during the pandemic. They've really invested in the small business ecosystem. And awesome that Stockton Numbers is helping people get these grants.
Stockton Numbers even helped us a little bit recently. So we're hoping that she's able to maintain her 100% acceptance rate.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. No, there's so much going on at all of our different locations, and we're excited to just share a little bit of the news with you. If you've got news for us to share, please feel free to reach out to Dio at lp.co or Ariel at lp.co, and we would be happy to highlight your news and your wins on our show here.
All right.
And I guess it's time for us to wrap up. Thanks for letting us chat a little bit about surviving the fires. And we just want to give a huge shout out to our community on Mill Creek Road in Healdsburg, California. We know it's going to be a big, long haul ahead of us, and especially many of you. And we will be looking for ways to help and looking for ways for our community to help as well.
Yeah.
And we'll see you soon.
So thanks for tuning in, folks. Great to be back, right?
It's great to be back.
Yeah,
Feels good.
we're going to be running every week on Thursdays now through Thanksgiving. So I think we have another 8-9 episodes. We've got some great guests coming up this season. So excited to continue to have us join us on Thursdays. And what?
That's it. I was just go ahead. Next week we'll probably have a nautical theme again.
All right. Well, thanks to Ariel and our producers, and we will see you next week.